Hey everybody. So not sure how long a stream this will be. I was gonna do a video on this, but I just was having trouble getting my thoughts all together enough for like a video. So I just figured I'd come on and just talk for a bit, and hope maybe people can help me kind of figure this out. So something I've really been noticing, and this has been true, I think, pretty much since I was a kid back in the 90s and 2000s, is that in the aftermath of the Cold War, there was kind of a question of whether there's a point in a collective West continuing to continue. I suppose you could say, like, did it have any value? Did NATO continue to have any value after everything, um, after the Cold War ended? Did the alliance between America and the EU still make sense? And I remember even back during the 1990s, people in the US were saying, we're subsidizing Europe, we're subsidizing these freeloaders. It's a waste of our time and money and stuff like that. So I feel like that's gotten worse and worse over years. I remember the Iraq War, I think, was a really big turning point. Because I think that's one of the few times that Europe actually stood up to the U.S., or at least were just kind of snarkily condemned the whole thing. Um, and I guess, like, I don't know if Bush thought that NATO would go along with it and they would join him in Iraq. But that whole thing just kind of became a mess, and like half the countries withdrew from it, and I don't know. It was just kind of a disaster. Um, and I don't know. Relations have just it's very much, for those of you who've watched anime. It's a very tsundere relationship between America and Europe. Um, like some days they'll be like, "Oh, America's this evil white supremacist neo-colonial country. We hate America." And then some days they're like, "We love America. It's the shining city on the hill. It's the greatest country ever." Sometimes they'll go along with crazy schemes like the Libyan War, and then sometimes they'll get upset and complain about it. It's very bipolar, very kind of back and forth, um, with regards to the whole thing. Constantini, you are repeating. So, yeah, I find particularly with Trump, with like the whole America First thing, a big part of it is just shitting on Europe. It's just saying, look, we're tired of subsidizing Europe. These guys are losers. They're just kind of a massive drag on the entirety of the project. And so it just keeps raising the question, I think, for Trump and for a lot of his supporters, is it really worth defending Europe? Because at the moment, at least how it's understood within the United States, is that Europe is militarily and increasingly economically weak, and it exists in the state it does only because the U.S. provides security and keeps bailing it out. And if the U.S. ever decided to stop providing it with security protection and basically stop running de facto its foreign policy, then it would have to face kind of the reality of having to be serious adult countries, which I don't think that Europe really wants. And you do see this a lot, and this is an argument that I see a lot from people in these circles who tend to be more Europhilic, that the reason that the EU is the way it is, and the reason that Germany and England and France are the way it is because America's forced them to be this way. Like all the shit livery, the mass immigration, all that stuff is something that the U.S. forced on them. And if the U.S. were to just get out of Europe, then it would somehow fix itself. Um, So I just don't think that's the case. I think and Mearsheimer's talks about this a lot, that Europe desperately wants the Americans to remain, because so long as America's there and it's the dominant force, it prevents any kind of wars from the various European countries to kind of go to war and fight each other. Like it keeps Germany down, it keeps France down, it keeps the continent peaceful. And I think there's a fear that if that was to happen, um, yeah, it would have. I lost my train of thought there. So there's that aspect to it. There's also, I just think there's been a huge divergence in terms of like of values and politics, and even on a religious level. America, Christianity in America has declined, but it's declined much slower than a lot of parts of Europe. And you don't have quite the same degree of forcible separate secularism in the U.S. that you do in other places. Like it is weird to me how often, if I'm watching something in America, American politicians will reference God or Christ or Christianity or something like that, because that just doesn't happen in Canada at all. Also, I feel like even if they completely like didn't live up to it with the because of the Patriot Act and it constantly getting renewed. The idea of like free speech, free expression, freedom in general is something that's still very deeply embedded in the in the American consciousness. And just over time, these and a lot of other things have just very rapidly diverged. Europe's moved increasingly towards managed democracy, um, with just kind of rigging elections and stuff like that. Censorship is really bad in the U.S. Sorry, no, censorship is really bad in the EU and in Britain and stuff like that. And just a point that I heard the other day was that Europe, I don't think, has ever made their own major social media company. And I can't really think of one. Like America has, China has, Russia has. Is there like a big social media platform that's been built in Europe? And I just don't think there has been one, and I just don't think maybe one could exist. Um, just because of how heavy the censorship is there, and how resistant a lot of it is to change. Like, it seems like a lot of the economies there have just stagnated, and they haven't been able to really modernize or move forward. They don't have the kind of innovative spark that the U.S. has. Like, I think the U.S. has a lot of issues with it, but I think it still is a lot more. I don't know if forward looking is the right term, but small p progressive or something like that. They still have some of the traditional Western um, frontier spirit. Uh, the infinity will, as I call it. I don't think Europe really has that anymore. So I think that stuff has really diverged over time. I think it's gotten more noticeable, particularly post beginning of the special military operation, because I don't know. It's just revealed how fundamentally weak the EU is. Like they ran out of all the countries there ran out of weapons in like 6 months to a year. Um, the industry there is completely destroyed. I mean, things have gotten substantially worse than a couple years back. Um, yeah, Northrop, tell me what you think. Like, in terms of energy prices went through the roof because of the whole like cutting off Nord Stream and natural gas and electricity from Russia. And it's just a kind of a combination of over just from how it seems to me economically, it feels like they passed a whole bunch of climate change green laws, but didn't actually innovate to make it like functional to coexist with the laws, and so we get into the current situation. But yeah, it's just in a state of continual decline, and I think that there's not a little bit of contempt marring the entire kind of relationship between the two countries. And I think a lot of MAGA people hated Europe because they, unironically, some business ruined because of the energy prices. Yeah, it's I've heard that the like natural gas is rapidly depleting there, and they're going to be in trouble or something something like that. Because I mean, if you recall, like the European leaders all shit on Trump, other than Orban and a couple others, before the first time he was elected. When he lost power, they called him a dictator. They constantly talked about they constantly talked about January 6th and just all the other like stuff. And then Starmer and some of the other people actively worked to prevent him from getting reelected. So I don't think that they liked him to begin with. I personally find it very detestable how immediately when Trump came back to power, all the big talk, all the Trump's a dictator, Trump's evil, all that shit just went away. And they immediately just bent the knee, kissed the ring, and just said, "Thank you, sir. Can I have another, Mr. Trump? Mr. Trump, you're a great man. We love you. We need you to come and help us and to fight with us against Russia." And we just get this constant, like, endless cycle of the EU leaders attacking Trump, and then Trump tells them to fuck off, and then they come back and just prostrate themselves before him, and then he'll side with them. And I just think to a lot of people, yeah, Constantini Martelli, yeah, with Rutte and Daddy Trump, and I think it just disgusts them more than if, like, the Europeans actually stood up to them. Because no one likes, I don't know, like, the only thing worse than a snake is, like, a weak snake. It's just, I don't know, just very sycophantic, but also just very treacherous and backstabby. And I think that they just despise them. And I think, like, when you see the, to go back to the whole cultural thing, when you see the amount of censorship in Europe, and the fact that they're TK sends me $5. Red State American. I grew up being told by adults that Europe gets to have social programs because America is their military out of guilt for World War II. Yeah, so I find them very weaselish. And when Trump did the whole later Gator, you mean men without chests? So I think they just despise it. And I mean, if you look at some of the interactions that the European leaders have had with Trump administration officials, they very much gone like they've just acted like they live in a safe space. Like Vance basically went over and just told them off and just called them on their bullshit. Just like, look, you guys are rigging elections. You're censoring free speech. You're actively blocking stuff from the United States here. You're not Christian anymore. You're not meaningfully European. Says the guy who married the Indian but has a better understanding of it. Like you guys are a joke. And the response I found to Vance just telling them off wasn't anger. It wasn't like, it was just them crying. And somebody can correct me if the chat if I'm wrong, but I remember when Vance did that speech, everyone just broke down and cried. And it was just a really pathetic response. And I just find with a lot of these meetings, like I don't know, some Trump official met with them a couple weeks back and just tried to explain to them that Ukraine can't win, and they said it was repugnant, and they started crying, and just all this stuff happens, and I just don't think like there's any respect there whatsoever. Um, yeah, the German guy was literally crying. It's just and a lot of people just hate shit like that. Like it's just and like to be fair, like if I'm Trump, I get why he would rather talk to Putin. I get why he'd rather talk to him or talk to Xi Jinping or stuff like that because at least he's not a bitch like Starmer or Macron. I mean, to be fair, like to Trump, and I've been critical of Trump recently. Would you want to spend? Can you imagine spending time in a room with Macron, Starmer, and Mertz, and having to talk to those guys for hours on end? I just like not even that I disagree with them political. So, anyways, what am I getting to after that big long opening rant? A lot of people are talking about the end of the collective West, and I find a lot of people are getting really upset about basically this breakdown in relations of Trump basically just constantly shitting on them, of making fun of them, and now the whole Greenland thing and the Venezuela thing and the idea that NATO is going to break apart and America and Europe are going to break apart and the collective West is going to break apart. And a lot of people, I think, are understandably very upset about that. And I did a video about this a while back, and I think to a lot of people, who are of indigenous European descent, in the New World, or the former colonies, people who are Christian or love Christianity, people who love the various European cultures, the French, the English, the Italians, the Germans, people who, and I go to Europe as often as I can to just see all the amazing things their civilization built. There's a very strong tendency, and it's almost impossible not to associate that with the modern state of Germany, the modern government of Germany. Like for me to go to Berlin and go to the Brandenburg Gate and just the Armory in Dresden, or there's the Science and Industry Museum. I forget what it's called in Berlin, where they just have these massive. Just I'm trying to remember. It's like the Polytechnic or Technical Museum in Berlin, where they have like giant early mechanical computers and all these just other innovative things that came out of the collective West. And I can't help but go there and feel that sense of nostalgia and associate that with the current government of Europe. And I think it is hurtful on a basic level. Is you see France, like you say America's fighting with France, Trump is attacking France, Trump's attacking Europe, whatever, and you associate France with Charlemagne, with Napoleon, with all these kind of amazing achievements of French civilization. But I guess the reality, what I'm getting to with this long roundabout thing, is the states, the people who run these countries, fundamentally hate these countries. Merz hates Germany, Macron hates France, Starmer hates Britain. And does the collective West really mean anything? It doesn't mean anything if there is this relationship, this political military alliance between Europe and America, if the leaders in Europe just hate their own countries, hate their own history, and are actively trying to destroy them as rapidly as possible. And I think the other part of it is we exist in a time. I think there's a lot of people, particularly from the settler colonies, who are of mixed European backgrounds, of a mixed European background, and kind of identify with, if not a single European country as their ancestry, several, or just Europe in general, who look at the state of the world and they go, post Cold War is the closest that, like, the indigenous European peoples, Christendom, the collective West, whatever you want to call it, was to being politically united, to like the actual end of No More Brother Wars, to this kind of end to the constant fighting in Europe that I think a lot of people historically dreamed of. And to see that go away, I think is very hard. To see, for lack of a better term, a majority of the world's, I think it might be a majority of the world's white people in an alliance, um, kind of in some sort of loose political union, and that going away and going back to Germany and France fighting and America fighting or competing, I think is something that is very difficult for a lot of people to stomach. And I think it's difficult for me to stomach too. But I guess the argument would be that aside from sentimentality, what's really the point of keeping it together? Um, Maybe people in the chat, like, what do you think? Am I making sense here? Do people get what I'm talking about? I have to be somewhat careful what I say because this is YouTube. So I'm using some euphemisms. But I think it's hard for me to look at the map of NATO and to see Canada, America, and just all these European countries in an alliance together and then imagine that breaking up. Um, in that limited sense of unity of our people being united. So there's that aspect to it, but it's just once again, when you talk about the EU and people refer to it as Europe, is it really Europe? I mean, the EU is entirely made up of, with a couple exceptions, the leadership is people who despise the European people, who despise Christianity, who despise any of their cultural inheritance. Um, so, yeah. Mistake Error says the reason the European governments haven't been overthrown is because America will sanction the new regimes. America can destroy all of Europe's economies. I think that's true, and I think that was an argument I made. I was talking to a friend of mine who was really upset about America withdrawing its support for Europe potentially and stop protecting them. Is I was just like, you know what, the EU collapsing would probably be a good thing. Um, because I don't know, like I still see, like I said, you see people in these circles who are very nostalgic and like the idea of no more brother wars, that Europe is united as a country, and they'll even start like support European federalism, partially because they're from like a mixed background and they like the idea of all their ancestors kind of being together under one roof. But I mean, I think the only real way for Europe to survive is for the EU to collapse at this point. I think it was a idea that for a lot of people, decent people, was undertaken with the best of intentions, but it clearly they have to do something about it now. I don't know if it's destroying it. I don't know if it's massively scaling it back, but it's a mess. It's a total mess, and the countries that are actually trying to save themselves, that are actually attempting to reverse course, um, like Hungary, like Slovakia, like Czechia, like even countries like Romania or Moldova. I know Moldova's not part of the EU, but there were some shenanigans that went down there. The EU steps in and stops them. I mean, it's not just the EU. It's obviously the U.S. with the uh, National Endowment with Democracy and the State Department and stuff like that. But I mean, they're basically the same people at this point in time. As an American of mixed German, Slavic, Polish extraction, I'm not a huge fan of this Ukraine stuff. So, yeah. Well, as I've said in the past, I'm of English and German and a bit of Scottish background. I always wonder how people in Europe would feel if, like, people from the colonies moved there, but were of, like, mixed European background. Like, I don't know how much that would matter. Like, if I were to move to the UK at some point as someone who's majority ethnically German but identifies as English. Yeah, U.S. aid still functions. So, I don't know. Honestly, maybe this will be for the best. Maybe, like, I don't know. But what will the result be of Trump if he does break with Europe? They aren't going to be able to rearm. I think that's pretty obvious at this point. It's just going to be a shit show. So is the EU going to fall apart? Are they going to try to increase centralization? I don't really know, to be honest. I don't know. I just don't know what would destroy the EU at this point in time. Maybe the EU will finally collapse when uh, when the German economy finally gives up the ghost. That might be what finally ends this thing. Um, because Germany's economy is falling off of a cliff, and it's really no longer able to just pay for everything. Then it's just going to be um, a slide down. But I don't know. We're dealing with people who are ideological here, and they will do anything to keep the project going um, a little longer. Yeah, France is on the brink of an IMF bailout. So I guess to talk about the whole uh, Germany turning off all the reactors was very dumb for their industry. Yeah. The idea that turning off your nuclear reactors and then cutting off oil and gas from Russia was somehow a good idea. I don't. But these people are fanatics. They didn't have any replacement plan. They didn't have any idea. They're just, I don't know. They're just retarded. Like it's just it's bad. And this kind of brings us to the whole Greenland thing. I just want to ask people in the chat, what do you guys think about the whole Greenland thing? Like do you think the Greenland, like, cuz I don't know, I'm starting to wonder um if maybe they are serious about it. It's just that Trump says so much shit and, like, none of it ever actually happens. But he's going really hard on the whole the whole Greenland thing. So I'm starting to wonder if maybe he is serious about it, and maybe it's something they're actually going to try to do. They're trying to do. They did the Maduro thing. Maybe just it's just kind of a side note. What the fuck is going on with Trump, and what the fuck's going on with Venezuela? Like, if someone could maybe tell me in the chat, because I'm having trouble even like following this whole thing mentally. But is literally what just happened that is literally what happened that they did the smash and grab, they captured Maduro, Trump announced that he was running Venezuela, and that was it? Is that... Arjun, are you muted or something? No, I shouldn't be muted. But yeah, like it's just like, what is that what happened in Venezuela? Because I feel like I'm living in some sort of like surreal comedy or something like that. Like they overthrew Maduro, and then what was the plan? Like I don't get, like, they didn't seize control, they didn't put the opposition in power, they didn't force the new regime, like the new president to hold elections. They didn't do anything. I don't get it. Like, what was the plan? Like, I was trying to come up with, like, and they announced, like, yesterday, I think Trump announced that we're going to be controlling the oil in controlling the oil revenue from Venezuela for the next like decade. And I'm just like, but you haven't done anything. Like I don't even get it. What is the plan? Is there a plan? Like, it's also weird because the operation went off so well, but there was no follow up. I don't get it. Like, I was trying to come up with how I would have done it. Like, here's a logical... Here's how I would have done it. Okay, so you smash and grab Maduro. That's shock and awe. The whole country is in, like, a state of just, like I said, shock. And then you go in, and I think you offer Maduro's VP, you just say, look, we will give amnesty to the administration officials, and we will not do widespread purges or just grab or just confiscate everyone's assets. But you need to have an internationally monitored free election and accept the results of it. And we won't put anybody in jail, but that is our demand. And I think they would have agreed to that, and I think the opposition would have won, and there would have been a transfer of power, and we wouldn't have had some sort of like collapse. Like it would have transferred. Because the thing I'm just scared about is this whole thing is just going to fall apart. And there is no... So I don't know. That's what my plan would have been in order to try to figure this thing out. But Trump, like, threw the leader of the opposition under the bus because she won the Nobel Peace Prize over him. I actually think that that's the reason. I don't think there's anything necessarily pragmatic, like that the Venezuelan people actually didn't respect her or whatever the cope is. I think literally he just is angry that he didn't get the Nobel Peace Prize, and this is just like a petty lashing out. But if you did things the way I had just suggested, which would not have been very difficult, then there would have been a pro-American government brought to power in Venezuela. It would have been a massive coup. Russia and China would have complained. Um, but like the U.S. could have let them monitor the election. I don't think there's really any doubt that if Venezuela had a free and fair election, and I use that unironically, the opposition would win and Maduro and the Chavistas would just get thrown out of power. So, but I don't get it. Like, what the point is of the whole operate? Like, it's like if I said that I'm running Canada and then I take no meth. Like, I'm sorry that I keep going over this. But we'll get to Greenland in a second. I just really want to break this down. Could somebody in the chat just correct me if I'm wrong? Because my brain can't complete this. So, is my understanding accurate that they captured Maduro, Trump announced that he was running Venezuela, and then nothing happened after that? Like, there was no occupation, there was no deal with the successor, there was no putting opposition in power. Literally, nothing happened. It just, I don't know. I'm sorry for ragging on about it. It's just, someone once said, I forget who it was, said hell is a place with no reason. And so this regime is hell. So going back to the whole Greenland thing, doesn't the U.S. already have a base on Greenland? I'm of the opinion that Trump doesn't know that the U.S. has a base on Greenland, and that is in part what this whole thing is about. When is there going to be the RGs for 2025? They're pretty much done. I just need to finish the PowerPoint with them in it. I'll try to get that done this weekend, but I should be able to do the stream by the end of the month. Is what I think. Is like I have the nominations done. I have the winners mostly chosen. I'm just putting the show together. Oh, so there's not a base at the moment? Was the base closed down because of it was just too much of a money? It was too much money to do it? He sent his son to the Greenland base. Yeah, I remember something about that. Maybe Trump just forgot that there was a base in Greenland. I don't know. It's hard to kind of it's hard to follow, but like, okay, other than just it's hard for me to just understand. So does Trump want Greenland because he wants to make America the second largest country in the world by land area? Is that like what this whole plan is about? I honestly do see why he might think that owning Greenland is in America's geopolitical interest, because it is strategically important. It does provide a shield of sorts from Russia and stuff like that. So, like, I do get that. I do think there probably are massive amounts of resources there. They may not be exploitable now, but if global warming continues, they might be exploitable in the foreseeable future. It is a large, basically empty piece of territory that is not viable as an independent country. I do think that I live in Manitoba. The government announced they're going to try to vastly expand the port in Churchill up in northern Manitoba, so stuff can be shipped through Hudson's Bay now that the Arctic is melting. So I do get that. So I think honestly, if they were able to get Greenland relatively cheap or relatively easily, um, it would actually be in America's strategic and and economic interest. I mean, the thing is, Greenland is just a country that can't be its own master. It's too small. It doesn't have a military. It's kind of like Iceland, but even more so. And if it doesn't have someone to be its overlord of sorts, it's just gonna, yeah. And I guess the other thing I do kind of hate though is that they're using like post-colonialist, like post-colonial rhetoric to say like Denmark has no claim to Greenland, and we're playing that game now. And I always hate when that shit gets brought up. Let's see here. Okay, the Cold War Arctic map. I don't know. And the LARPers in Greenland wanted to be independent and thought that they could be an independent country, but that was really going nowhere. Um, Constantini Martelli says, I'm opposed to it because I don't want Greenlanders to be U.S. citizens. If it's a territory, maybe. If they were to bring it in as a state, that would be a horrible idea. That would be a new blue state. Um, yeah. I think it would be I think it would be a mess politically. What else was I thinking about? Something involving. Yeah. No, Greenland is a massive drain on Denmark. Greenland is just a huge drain on the Danish treasury. I think a lot of people in Denmark want to get rid of it because it just exists on huge subsidies. So the proposal I have, and what America should have done, is they should just say like to Greenland, look, we're going to have a referendum on you joining America. We will give everybody who votes yes $2 million. Like, what is it, like 58,000 people on 1,000 people on Greenland? Like, they could give everybody easily like a couple $1 million. Let me see here. Oops, I hit the button by mistake. Okay, so 58,000. Why is that going? Times. Yeah, it would only be $58 billion to give everybody on Greenland $1 million, which honestly doesn't seem that much for a piece of land that big. So America can annex it and settle it with Afrikaners. Also giving everyone however many millions would ruin Greenland. Yeah, it would ruin Greenland, but it would be funny. And that might all the only thing that actually matters in the end is it being funny. Let's see here. Anyways, I don't know. Maybe just to kind of, I think I said most of what I wanted to say. Hopefully, it wasn't too incoherent and incompetent. Just to ask people in the chat, do you think Trump is actually going to go for Greenland, and what is that going to look like? Is that going to be him going and seizing it militarily, forcing Denmark to sell it to him? Um, the Danes just giving in and ceding it. I don't know, because I mean it could very easily be taken by the U.S. tomorrow. There's no military there. The EU's not talking about attempting to militarily defend Greenland, so I don't know. What do people in the chat think? Is Trump serious about this? Or is this just another nothing burger? Another nothing ever happens nothing burger. There is no Danish president. Do you mean like the Danish monarch? So, anyways, I think that covered everything I wanted to say. The RGs are coming. There's a bunch of I have a bunch of reaction reviews I need to do. I don't know. I have a lot of stuff. I have the video I'm going to do on the difficulty in comparing power scaling between universes and some other stuff. So, anyways, guys,